The microphone was already in my dad's hand when he said it, his voice thick with pride and champagne, the whole room quieting down because everyone knew this was going to be the big emotional moment of the night. He smiled at my brothers, lifted his glass, and said, "I owe it all to my sons. My daughter never had what it takes." The words hit me like a slap across the face. I felt my stomach drop, my ears start ringing, and every single memory of my childhood come crashing back at once. I was standing there in a blue dress I'd bought just for his retirement party, holding a gift I'd spent months planning, and suddenly I wasn't a successful professional woman or a loving daughter anymore. I was just the little girl who was never enough. So tell me, was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have done the same thing if your own father humiliated you like that in front of everyone you loved? That night was supposed to be about celebrating my dad's 40-year career and everything he'd built for our family. Instead, it became the night I finally realized I'd been chasing his approval my entire life, and he was never going to give it to me. Growing up, I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother, Mark, and my younger brother, Jason. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Big house in a quiet neighborhood, backyard with a pool, a golden retriever, and parents who seemed solid and successful. My dad, Robert, was a senior manager at a manufacturing company, the kind of man who wore pressed shirts even on weekends and believed that hard work was the only thing that mattered. My mom, Linda, was softer, kinder, and always tried to keep the peace. But even she couldn't change the way my dad saw the world. From as early as I can remember, my brothers were the future of the family. Mark was athletic and confident, the star of his high school football team. Jason was brilliant with numbers, winning math competitions and talking about becoming an engineer just like Dad. And then there was me. I loved reading, writing, and art. I wanted to be a journalist, to tell stories and give people a voice. To my dad, that was useless. Whenever I brought home a good grade, he'd nod politely and then turn to my brothers to ask about their achievements. When Mark scored a touchdown, Dad threw a party. When Jason got into an advanced science program, Dad bragged about it to anyone who would listen. When I won a regional writing competition, he said, "That's nice, sweetheart," and went back to watching the game. I spent years trying to prove myself. I joined debate club, volunteered at shelters, took on leadership roles, and worked 2 part-time jobs through college so I wouldn't have to ask him for money. Every milestone felt like a test I had to pass to earn his love, and every time it felt like I was still falling short. He'd say things like, "Your brothers are building real careers. You're just playing with words." Or, "One day you'll understand that passion doesn't pay the bills." I laughed it off in front of him, but I cried about it in my room more times than I can count. After college, I landed a job at a respected media company. It wasn't glamorous at first, but I worked my way up, story by story, deadline by deadline, until I became a senior editor. I moved into my own apartment, paid off my student loans, and built a life I was proud of. My dad barely noticed. When I told him about my promotion, he said, "That's good. Mark just got another raise, you know." It was always a comparison, always a competition I never agreed to be part of. The retirement party was supposed to be different. My mom asked me to help plan it, and I threw myself into it because I wanted, just once, for my dad to see how capable I was. I coordinated the venue, designed the invitations, organized the guest list, and even put together a slideshow of his career. Digging through old photos and calling his former colleagues for stories, I spent weeks on it. I wanted him to feel honored and loved, because despite everything, he was still my dad. The night of the party, the room was filled with coworkers, friends, and family. My brothers were there with their wives, laughing loudly and soaking up the attention. My dad was glowing, shaking hands, telling stories, and accepting praise like it was oxygen. I felt nervous but hopeful, standing near my mom, watching him enjoy the moment. When it was time for speeches, my boss from the media company even stood up and thanked my dad for raising such a driven and talented daughter, and I saw my dad's smile tighten for just a second before he clapped politely. Then my dad took the microphone. He thanked his colleagues, his friends, and my mom. He talked about sacrifice and long nights at the office, about building a legacy, and then he said it. "I owe it all to my sons. My daughter never had what it takes." Some people laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. Others looked at me with wide eyes. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My brothers stared at the floor, and I just stood there frozen, feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. In that moment, every time he'd dismissed me, every time he'd compared me, Every time I'd tried harder and still failed in his eyes, came rushing back. I felt small and angry and heartbreakingly tired all at once. I wanted to run out of the room, but my legs wouldn't move. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. Instead, I did the one thing I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I stepped forward and took the microphone from his hand. My voice was shaking, but it didn't break. I said, "Dad, I'm really glad you're proud of my brothers. They've worked hard and they deserve it. But I've worked hard too. I've built a career I'm proud of. I've supported myself, paid my own way, and helped this family more than you'll ever know. I planned this entire night because I wanted to celebrate you. And hearing you say that I never had what it takes, in front of everyone, is the most painful thing you've ever done to me." The room was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. I looked at him and realized he wasn't the giant I'd built up in my head. He was just a man who couldn't see past his own narrow definition of success. I said, "So this is my gift to you. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I love you, but I'm done shrinking myself to fit into your expectations." Then I placed the wrapped gift at his feet, turned around and walked out. So that was the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice between staying quiet to keep the peace or finally standing up for myself. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have walked out? Or would you have swallowed the pain and stayed? I went to my car and cried for a long time. My phone buzzed nonstop, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. When I finally did, there were messages from my mom begging me to come back, from my brothers saying they were sorry, and from my dad, just one message that said, "You embarrassed me." That was it. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I didn't mean it," just that I had embarrassed him. Something in me finally snapped into place. I realized I had spent my entire life worrying about embarrassing him, disappointing him, failing him, and he had never once worried about how he made me feel. Over the next few days, I stayed with a friend and tried to make sense of everything. My mom came over with red eyes and shaky hands, saying my dad hadn't slept, and that the house felt empty without me. She said he didn't mean it, that he was just old-fashioned and bad with words. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't keep pretending that his words didn't matter. My brothers called and admitted they'd always known he treated me differently, but they didn't know how to stand up to him either. Hearing that hurt, but it also helped me see that I wasn't crazy. It wasn't all in my head. A week later, my dad asked to meet me for coffee. I almost said no, but I knew I needed closure one way or another. He looked smaller sitting there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired. He started by saying, "I worked my whole life to give you kids everything, and now I'm the villain." I took a deep breath and said, "I never asked you to be perfect. I just wanted you to see me." We talked for 2 hours. I told him about the nights I cried over his comments, the pressure I felt, the way his words shaped my self-worth. For the first time, he listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just listened. Then he said something I never expected. He said, "I didn't know how to be proud of something I didn't understand. I thought pushing you would make you stronger. I didn't realize I was breaking you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real. He told me he was proud of me. Not for my brothers, not in comparison, but for me. And I cried right there in that coffee shop, because I finally heard the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. The aftermath wasn't magically perfect. Our relationship didn't transform overnight, but it changed. He started asking about my work, actually asking, and listening to the answers. He came to one of my speaking events and sat in the front row. My brothers became more aware of how they spoke about success and stopped measuring everything in promotions and salaries. And I stopped measuring my worth by my dad's approval. Looking back, that night at the retirement party was the most painful and the most freeing moment of my life. It forced me to stop living for someone else's definition of success and start living for my own. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't disrespectful, even when it's your own parent. Sometimes it's the bravest and most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like you had to earn love by becoming someone you're not, I want you to know you're not alone. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. You already have it. If you were on my side, like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, because there are so many people out there who need to hear them. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I read every single one. I'll see you all in the next story.